All right, welcome back to Living in Minnesota. My name is Joe Carmack. I'm on with John Coleman today from the Jason Martin Group out in Washington, D.C. What is going on, my man? We're going to be talking all things relocating to or from the Twin Cities to the D.C. area. So thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure to be here. I feel like I'm in the sights of fame over here and excited to hear about all these people thinking about moving from DC to Minnesota and vice versa.
Yeah, I love it. Let's connect our two audiences. This should be a fun conversation. So I always like to start off, let's talk about the weather. Unless, unlike the call I just had from California, you guys are probably fairly similar to Minnesota. What's your guys' weather like?
We're going to be substantially warmer than you guys.
Okay, sure.
Here's the biggest difference of weather from coming somewhere in like the Midwest to DC is I when I quote it from originally from Michigan, I usually tell people it's about 10 degrees warmer from Southeast Michigan. So from you guys, I'd say probably on average, probably about 15 to 20 degrees warmer than what you're used to.
Sure.
The biggest difference in the weather you're going to feel is, first of all, with regards to the winters, it's less gray skies for days. Like I feel like back in the Midwest, you don't see a lot of sun for extended periods of time.
Sure.
Even when it's really cold here, it seems to always still be sunny, which gives it a little bit warmer of a feeling. So DC is a much more transient city in the sense of you get everybody from the north moving to DC, and it feels so much warmer and brighter. And then you get people from Miami, Texas, and everywhere moving to DC, and they think that we're in the coldest place in the world.
Sure. Yeah. Do you guys get a lot of snow? I mean, in the winter?
Not
really.
You think it is. Like we probably get 1 to 2 events per year. And by events, it's like maybe an inch. Every once in a while, we'll end up with like a foot or two, but those are really, really crazy. The city shuts down for snow. Like if it's threatening to snow, like they cancel school when there's snow on the forecast, not when it actually starts snowing.
Oh, funny. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So that's not really like us. You're not as similar as I thought. We obviously have more snow. I mean, I'm from Colorado originally, so I'm used to like big snowfalls as well. It is kind of surprising to me how often they shut down schools because of snow. And you're like, you're in Minnesota, man. And we got, millions and millions of dollars worth of snow removal infrastructure.
People know how to handle it and drive.
Right. Like, don't we know this by now? So they do still shut down for some reason, which just blows my mind. But it's usually like, -20 and there's 3 inches of snow in the forecast and they don't want kids at the school bus stop without a jacket or something. So
yeah,
it's definitely like that. I mean, Minnesota is also, our summers are at least warmer. There's tons of stuff to do outside. It's super green. I mean, are you guys like that where you got lots of outdoor space to do in the warmer months?
So the warmer months, we go even further. You guys have it so much better in the summertime because that's when, you're in like during the day, you're in swim shorts. And then at night you throw on a hoodie and sit around the fire and chill.
Yeah.
It is purely a sweat fest here in DC. We are built on a swamp and there is lots of moisture in the air and it is constantly 100 degrees and the humidity is going to make it feel closer to 110 on the hotter days. So I
didn't think DC was that hot. Huh.
It's warm. It's real warm for days at a time. So
all right, interesting. Good to know. Cool. All right, let's talk about the next most popular topic, which is taxes. So Minnesota is apparently, I found this out, we're one of the highest states for income taxes, like number 5 or something. But then we're about 1%, 1.1 for property taxes. So how do you guys compare tax-wise?
So I don't know where we rank, but I know that the income taxes in DC are high. But also if you're moving to this area, you're not just considering living in DC, you're considering Maryland, Virginia too. So you got Northern Virginia and you got some prippier parts of Maryland. So you play around a little bit with it. And those are actually probably closer to what you're used to. In DC, income taxes, they get you. Property taxes are pretty reasonable. So I think the equation for it is like you take the sales price, which is usually a pretty high sales price in comparison to other places in the country. You divide it by 100 and then you multiply it by 0.85. So if you have a $600,000 house, your property taxes are more like $5,000 per year, which not too bad in comparison to some places where it's maybe double it. Well, maybe the same amount of money, but for the property price, it's high.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of interesting because you're at a higher price point. So we're about 1.1. So if I got a $600,000 house, it might be 6,500 or something.
Mm-hmm.
6,000, something like that. So that's cool. Okay, well, let's talk about real estate prices then while we're on the topic. Let's say I'm moving to your city. I'm a first-time buyer, a young aspiring politician or something.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of a first-time buyer price bracket for single-family homes?
So for single family homes, and the way to break it down in DC is we have a lot more row homes. So like having big yards and stuff like that's a little bit different over here on the East Coast.
Hmm.
But if you want something that's about, let's call it 1,000 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, you're going to be anywhere from about, I'd say 450,000 up to the limit is unknown.
Wow, for an attached like row house.
Mm-hmm. So
Wow.
that's I'd say on my average price point for something like that's probably usually around 600,000 to 700,000.
Wow. Okay. And so what's something detached? I'm assuming you got to go further out.
You got to, so if you're going to go detached, there's certain parts of the city that you can go to. Those will be a little bit bigger. Those are in less dense areas, so the price might equate itself out. You might be more in the 7 to 850 range
Sure.
in some of the areas that are a little bit further away from the city. But then if you go to places that are super popular, like Georgetown and stuff like that, you're into the millions way too easy. Like you can find a shell for over $1 million in some of those neighborhoods. So.
Sure. Okay. Crazy. And then do you guys have a lot of condos, like high-rise condos, or not?
So there's height restrictions in DC. So they can't build any buildings higher than the Washington Monument. So there's a restriction on how high a building can be. So we avoid the vibe of like a New York or other cities that have tall skyscrapers, but we do have a lot of condos coming in, a lot of luxury condos, especially downtown.
Sure.
So
what are those kind of run you?
1 bedroom, you're probably talking about 400,000 would be the average, but the nicer you go and the closer you want to be downtown towards the White House and the mall and all that stuff is going to be going up. So I think about 400,000 would be a starting point, and more comfortably probably closer to 5.
Okay, here's a question for you. So let's say I want to, maybe I'm working into, closer into your guys' metros. But if I want to get out, I want a little more space, is there acreage available, or how far out you got to go to get a little more breathing room?
Mm-hmm. So you don't have to go too far. Like you can go across the Anacostia River and you're into Virginia, but your prices aren't much better there. So like Arlington and Alexandria, the prices there mimic a lot of DC. You can go out into Maryland and you can get a little bit more bang for your buck in some areas, something like Chevy Chase or Potomac. Those areas are super expensive as well. But there are places like Silver Spring, Mount Rainier, where you can get a little bit more space. But at the same time, you start to get a little bit distance from DC when you start getting those. And so staying on the metro line tends to be a common consideration, because when people will start officially commuting again, the easiness of being able to hop on the metro, they'll take you right to downtown, tends to be one of the selling aspects of houses around here. So if you're closer to the metro, prices will be higher. If you're further away, they'll be lower.
Sure. Interesting. I wouldn't have even really thought of sticking to a metro line for a geographic area to move to. So cool. That's interesting. Awesome. Okay. So somebody's, in Minnesota or in, DC, let's say go in your direction first. If they're thinking they want to move there, maybe they've been there, done touristy things, what do you guys recommend for getting started, figuring out where you want to live and getting used to price points?
So getting used to price points is usually the hardest thing of coming from the Midwest to DC. Chicago people will probably be the closest, although property values are probably even a little bit higher than Chicago here.
Sure.
So getting used to the prices is going to be a little challenging. However, the rental prices make it snap into reality real quick, because the rental market's fast and furious here, and the rental prices for houses and apartments are generally in line with what you'd be paying on a mortgage payment. So it's sticker shock, but it's sticker shock that people will kind of get used to over time. A lot of the times when someone's moving, the first question I ask them on our relocation calls that we do is like, have you been to DC outside of like your 8th grade class trip.
Right.
Because so a lot of people like to come to DC in their 8th grade class trips, but you're going to experience a very different DC.
Sure.
And if you haven't been to DC yet, you probably need to get here, because DC is a very neighborhood, block to block city where you need to come figure out what's vibing with you and what's right. So a lot of times I have people fly in and we do kind of a tour talking about different neighborhoods that fit their price point with the parameters that they're looking for. And that helps to really settle in what they're looking for with regards to stuff in DC.
Sure. I would have to imagine just getting on an MLS search with you to be able to say, okay, you want to afford, $700,000 to $900,000. These are the only areas you can pick from, and I can imagine that'll start narrowing it down for you pretty darn quick. And then touring those areas.
The map draws itself, but what we tend to find is people are going to start with really lofty expectations. But then if you're moving to the city and you really want to be in the city, sometimes you're going to start giving up that square footage and additional bedroom and stuff like that in order to have proximity to the cool restaurants and bars and stuff. DC, from a standpoint, it used to be really a meat and potatoes town. Like people would go out and get steaks. It's political and all that stuff. DC's really turned itself into a foodie mecca for its size. Like for the number of Michelin star restaurants we have for our density and population is really remarkable. So we have a lot of renowned chefs. We have a lot of really good high-end restaurants, and some not high-end, but just flat out delicious. And since it's such a melting pot of people moving from Minnesota to DC, from people moving from across not only across the country, but across the world to DC. We got some of the best Ethiopian food in DC for the United States. We have great Italian food, Greek food, Mediterranean food. So if you're looking for something, we're going to have a really good range of like, here's the best you're going to get from mom and pop shop. It's pretty affordable, to here's that luxury chef that's going to do that twist on everything to make it good. So, and for tourists coming to DC, it's something that they overlook all the time. They go to Old Ebbitt Grill and some of that stuff that's pretty classic, but there's stuff to really literally sink your teeth into. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it sounds like it's definitely worthwhile talking to somebody like you, getting you on the phone and picking your brain and finding what's important to you as a buyer. Moving into the neighborhoods, getting used to what kind of amenities you like, finding the metro lines or whatever that work for you guys. So I love it. Cool. John, thanks so much for being with us, man. Appreciate your time. Appreciate being able to pick your brain and get people used to our two different worlds that are very different, but not that different. So it was really cool to meet you.
Definitely. Nice to meet you as well.
Well, if you guys are watching this, make sure to subscribe both of our channels. So we're going to link both of us in the descriptions below. So if you're watching this on John's channel, you can find Living in Minnesota. If you're coming our direction, or if you're going towards DC, make sure find John's info below. You can get phone numbers, email addresses, channels, and everything else is in the description below. So perfect. Thanks, man.
Perfect.
See ya.
My pleasure.